Have you ever noticed how certain friendships leave you feeling emptied, as if someone reached inside your chest and drained something vital while you smiled and pretended everything was fine? Perhaps there's a name that appears on your phone, and before you even read the message, your stomach tightens. A specific person whose presence used to bring joy, but now brings a weight you can't quite name. You tell yourself, it's just a rough patch, that all friendships go through seasons, that you're being too sensitive. But late at night, when you're alone with your thoughts, you know something is wrong. You feel it in the exhaustion that follows every conversation, in the way you rehearse what you'll say to them as if preparing for battle, in how you've started avoiding places where you might run into them. And the worst part, you feel guilty for feeling this way about someone you're supposed to care about. Maybe you've tried to explain it to others. You've mentioned how this friend only calls when they need something, how every conversation somehow circles back to their problems, how your achievements are met with lukewarm congratulations followed immediately by a story about their own struggles. And what did people tell you? That you're overthinking it, that real friends are there for each other through hard times, that maybe you're not being supportive enough, patient enough, understanding enough. So you pushed the discomfort down and tried harder, gave more, stayed longer. You convinced yourself that your exhaustion was a character flaw, that your desire for distance was evidence of your own inadequacy as a friend. You've been carrying a relationship that should be lifting you up, and somehow you've been made to believe that the problem is your inability to carry it well enough. But what if I told you that everything you've been feeling is not confusion, it's clarity? That the knot in your stomach isn't anxiety, it's your body's alarm system trying to save you from something your mind hasn't fully admitted yet? What if the friendship that's draining you isn't just difficult or going through a temporary crisis, but is toxic by design? Not toxic in the way people carelessly throw that word around, but genuinely extractive, deliberately one-sided, psychologically calculated to take from you while giving back just enough to keep you tethered. This isn't about a friend having a bad month or struggling through a divorce or dealing with depression. This is about someone who has turned your compassion into a resource, your loyalty into a weakness, your kindness into a tool they use against you. The truth is, toxic friendships don't announce themselves with obvious cruelty or dramatic betrayals. They arrive disguised as need, wrapped in vulnerability, presented as mutual connection. They seduce you with intermittent moments of genuine warmth that make you believe you're wrong to doubt them. They operate in the space between what you can prove and what you can feel, leaving you perpetually questioning your own perception. And by the time you realize what's happening, you're already so entangled that leaving feels like tearing off your own skin. This video will show you exactly how you got here, why your mind didn't protect you, and what's actually happening beneath the surface of a friendship that's slowly destroying you. Because once you understand the psychological architecture of toxic friendship, you'll never be able to unsee it, and that recognition, however painful, is the first step toward reclaiming the parts of yourself you didn't even realize you'd surrendered. You're not stupid, you're not naive. So why didn't you see this coming? Why did someone intelligent, perceptive, and emotionally aware end up trapped in a friendship that operates more like a hostage situation than a mutual bond? The answer lies not in your weakness, but in the sophisticated psychological mechanisms that toxic people exploit, often without you even knowing you're being manipulated. And the most insidious part is that your best qualities, your empathy, your loyalty, your capacity for compassion are precisely what made you vulnerable. You were selected for this role, not randomly caught in it. Toxic friendships don't begin toxic. They begin with connection, with shared laughter, with someone who seemed to understand you in ways others didn't. They begin with vulnerability that felt like intimacy, with late-night conversations that made you feel special, chosen, trusted. The shift happens gradually, so incrementally that you can't pinpoint the exact moment things changed. One day, you're equals sharing life together, and somehow, without any clear transition, you've become their therapist, their crisis manager, their emotional support system. But when did you agree to this role? You didn't. It was assigned to you through a process so subtle that by the time you noticed, the pattern was already entrenched. Your mind didn't fail you. It was systematically conditioned to accept increasingly unacceptable behavior. Psychologists call this the foot in the door technique. Small requests that establish compliance, followed by larger demands that feel impossible to refuse because you've already said yes so many times before. First, they needed to vent for 20 minutes. Then it became an hour. Then it became daily calls. Then it became midnight emergencies. Then it became cancelling your own plans to accommodate their latest crisis. At each stage, the escalation was small enough that refusing felt petty, unreasonable, unkind. And you, being a good person, absorbed the cost rather than seem selfish. But here's what you didn't realize. You weren't being compassionate. You were being trained. From childhood, you learned that being a good friend meant being available, understanding, forgiving. You learned that putting others first was virtuous, that boundaries were selfish, that real love required sacrifice. These lessons, however well-intentioned, became the programming that toxic people exploit with surgical precision. They didn't need to convince you to give endlessly. Society already did that. They simply needed to position themselves as deserving recipients of your pre-installed generosity. And if you're someone with high empathy, someone who feels others' pain almost as intensely as your own, you became an even more valuable target. Because empathetic people don't just tolerate bad behavior, they generate explanations for it. Their childhood was difficult. They're going through a divorce. They have anxiety. They don't mean it that way. Every boundary violation gets filtered through your compassion and emerges as something you should understand, accommodate, forgive. But toxic friends aren't struggling to be better. They're succeeding at being exactly what they are, extractors. They've identified someone who gives more than they take, and they've built a relationship architecture designed for one-way resource flow. Your compassion isn't inspiring their growth, it's fueling their entitlement. Every time you overlooked a dismissive comment, every time you accepted a last-minute cancellation while they never accepted yours, every time you listened to their problems for hours but got 5 distracted minutes for your own, you were teaching them exactly how much they could take from you. The friendship isn't failing. It was designed to extract, not exchange. And the person being drained isn't confused about what's happening. You're finally waking up to a dynamic that's been operating in plain sight all along. Now that you understand how you got here, you need to see the pattern itself, because toxic friendship has a structure, a design that repeats across different people, different situations, different stories. Once you learn to recognize this architecture, you'll see it everywhere. And you'll wonder how you ever missed something so obvious. The framework operates on 5 core patterns, each one reinforcing the others, each one keeping you locked in a cycle that feels impossible to escape. First, notice the investment imbalance. You plan your schedule around their availability, but they cancel on you with barely an apology. You remember the details of their life, their work stress, their family drama, their health concerns, but they forget your birthday, your promotion, your mother's surgery. You show up when they need you, but when you need them, they're suddenly busy, distracted, dealing with something more urgent. This isn't occasional or accidental. It's a consistent pattern where your time, energy, and attention flow in one direction, and the return flow is a trickle they control completely. You're working full-time on a friendship where they're barely part-time, and somehow you've accepted this as normal. Second, watch how they use vulnerability. They share crises that demand immediate response, relationship breakups, job losses, health scares, family emergencies, and you, being caring, drop everything to support them. But notice the timing. Notice how their crises always seem to emerge right when you have something important happening, as if your good news triggers their bad news. Notice how their problems always eclipse yours. how conversations about your struggles get redirected back to their bigger, more urgent pain. They've learned that vulnerability is a powerful tool, not for building genuine closeness, but for commanding attention and resources. Their pain becomes a claim on your time, and you're left feeling selfish for wanting space when they're clearly suffering. Third, observe the pattern of subtle dismissal. When you share an achievement, they respond with faint praise followed immediately by a qualifier. You got promoted? That's great, but the real challenge starts now. You're excited about a new relationship? I'm happy for you, but don't you think it's moving too fast? You accomplished something difficult? Yeah, but you should have seen what I dealt with last year. They position themselves as the voice of reality, the one who keeps you grounded, but what they're actually doing is ensuring you never feel fully good about anything. Your wins get minimized. Your problems get compared to theirs and found smaller. Your emotions get reframed as overreactions. And this happens so gently with such seeming concern that you start doubting your own right to feel good about your life. Fourth, notice who controls the story. In every conflict, every misunderstanding, every moment of tension, they're the victim and you're the one who failed them. They're always misunderstood, always struggling, always doing their best in impossible circumstances. You're always the one who wasn't patient enough, didn't try hard enough, didn't understand deeply enough. Any attempt to address your hurt gets flipped into a conversation about how you hurt them by bringing it up. They've mastered the art of making you apologize for your own boundaries, for your own needs, for your own hurt. And finally, watch the pattern of intermittent reward. Just when you're ready to pull away, they do something genuinely kind. They remember something important. They show up unexpectedly. They say something that reminds you why you became friends in the first place. These moments feel like proof that you were wrong to doubt them, that the friendship is real, that things are getting better. But this is the most dangerous pattern of all, because it's exactly how your brain gets hooked. Psychologists have studied this extensively. Intermittent reinforcement creates stronger attachment than consistent reward. It's the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. The unpredictable reward keeps you coming back, hoping that the next interaction will be like the good ones, convincing yourself that if you just try harder, if you just understand them better, the friendship will finally become what those brief moments promised it could be. If this is resonating with you, if you're seeing these patterns in your own life, subscribe to this channel. Because what comes next will show you how deep this really goes. And you'll need to understand the full picture to finally break free. But here's what most people miss. What makes toxic friendships so much more dangerous than a simple one-sided relationship? These friendships don't just drain your energy or waste your time. They fundamentally reshape how you see yourself, how you understand reality, how you trust your own perceptions. The damage isn't just external, it's internal, neurological, woven into the very fabric of how your mind processes the world. And by the time you notice what's happened, the distortion has already become your new normal. Watch what happens to your self-perception over time. Every subtle criticism, every dismissive comment, every moment where your feelings were minimized accumulates in your psyche like sediment at the bottom of a river. Individually, each instance seems too small to address, but collectively, they form a foundation of doubt that changes how you see yourself. You start questioning your own judgment. Maybe you are too sensitive. Maybe you do overreact. Maybe your problems really aren't that serious compared to what others deal with. The voice in your head that used to defend you, that used to know your worth, starts to sound suspiciously like their voice. You've internalized their dismissiveness and now you dismiss yourself before they even get the chance. This is how psychological erosion works, not through one devastating blow, but through 1,000 tiny cuts that bleed you so slowly you don't realize you're dying. And then there's the reality distortion, the way toxic friends rewrite history to maintain their narrative. You remember a conversation where they said something hurtful, but when you bring it up, they look at you with genuine confusion. That never happened. You're misremembering. You're twisting their words. You took it the wrong way. And they say it with such confidence, such certainty, that you start to doubt your own memory. Did it happen the way you remember? Maybe you are being unfair. Maybe your perception is skewed. Psychologists have a term for this: gaslighting. It's when someone manipulates you into questioning your own sanity, your own reality, and it doesn't require malicious intent. Some people gaslight instinctively, rewriting the past to protect their self-image, genuinely believing their revised version of events. But intent doesn't matter when the effect is the same. You stop trusting the one person you should never doubt: yourself. Notice what happens to your body in their presence. Your nervous system, that ancient alarm system designed to detect threat, remains in a state of low-level activation whenever you're around them. Your shoulders tense, your jaw tightens, your breathing becomes shallow. When their name appears on your phone, your heart rate increases, stress hormones flood your bloodstream, your body prepares for conflict even when your mind insists everything is fine. This is your biology trying to communicate what your psychology won't admit. This person is not safe. But you've learned to override these signals, to treat your body's wisdom as anxiety you need to manage rather than information you need to hear. You feel simultaneously obligated to maintain the friendship and resentful that you have to. This contradiction creates a constant internal tension that exhausts you even when nothing is actively wrong. And your boundaries, those essential psychological structures that define where you end and others begin, start to dissolve. Toxic friends are expert boundary testers. They push a little, watch your reaction, and if you don't push back, they push further. Can they call at midnight? Can they vent for 2 hours? Can they cancel plans last minute? Can they criticize your choices? Can they demand your time? Now you see the damage, you understand the patterns. You recognize how deeply this has affected you, but knowledge alone doesn't free you. Understanding why you're trapped doesn't automatically open the cage. So the question becomes, how do you take back your power without giving them new ammunition to use against you? How do you create distance from someone who has proven they'll weaponize any honest conversation you attempt? The answer lies not in confrontation, but in strategic withdrawal. Not in explaining yourself, but in quietly reclaiming the territory you've surrendered. Start with something simple, but profound. Become less available. Not dramatically, not with announcements or explanations, just gradually harder to reach. When they text, let the message sit for a few hours before responding. When they call, sometimes let it go to voicemail. When they ask to meet, you're busy more often than you used to be. You don't need to justify this. You don't need to provide detailed explanations for why you can't talk right now, can't meet up this week, can't drop everything to help with their latest crisis. The word no is a complete sentence, but even better is, I can't. 2 words that close the door without inviting negotiation. Toxic friends are skilled at arguing with your reasons, at finding holes in your excuses, at making you feel guilty for prioritizing anything over their needs. But when you simply become less accessible, when your availability quietly contracts, there's nothing concrete for them to argue against. You're just busy, you're just tired, you're just not as free as you used to be. Notice what you share with them. Every piece of vulnerable information you reveal becomes potential leverage, something they can reference later, something they can use to demonstrate how much they know about you, something they can subtly weaponize during disagreements. So stop offering them access to your inner world. When they ask how you're doing, keep it surface level. Work is fine. Life is good. Nothing major to report. Treat them the way you'd treat a friendly acquaintance, not an intimate friend. Share the weather of your life, not the climate. This isn't dishonesty, it's protection. You're simply reclassifying them from someone who gets full access to someone who gets the public version. And when you do this, something interesting happens. You realize how much of your relationship was built on you performing emotional labor, you providing content, you filling silences with your vulnerability while they consumed it without reciprocating. Then there's the mirror technique, a simple but powerful recalibration of investment. Match their energy exactly. If they cancel plans twice, you cancel once. If they take 3 days to respond to your message, you take 3 days to respond to theirs. If they remember your birthday, you remember theirs. If they forget, you forget too. This isn't pettiness or revenge, it's mathematics. It's bringing the relationship into equilibrium by refusing to compensate for their lack of effort. Most toxic friendships survive because one person constantly overcompensates, constantly gives more to balance the equation. When you stop doing that, when you let the imbalance become visible instead of hidden, the true nature of the relationship reveals itself. And often, they don't even notice the change because they were never paying close attention to what you were giving in the first place. Finally, there's a technique therapists call the grey rock method. You become emotionally uninteresting, psychologically bland, offering nothing for them to feed on. Their drama gets met with minimal reaction. Their provocations get neutral responses. Their attempts to draw you into their chaos encounter a smooth, unreactive surface. But here's the truth nobody wants to hear, the uncomfortable reality that will either liberate you or devastate you, depending on your willingness to face it honestly. You're not just a victim in this dynamic, you're a participant. And until you acknowledge what you've been getting from this toxic friendship, until you face your own hidden investments in staying, you'll never truly be free. Because the question isn't just why they treat you this way, it's why you've allowed it for so long. And the answer to that question lives in the parts of yourself you'd rather not examine. Consider the possibility that being needed has felt like being valued, that their constant crises have given you a role, an identity, a sense of purpose that perhaps you were missing elsewhere in your life. When they call in the middle of the night, when they lean on you during their breakdowns, when they describe you as their rock, their lifeline, the only person who really understands them, doesn't some part of you feel essential, important, special? There's a psychological term for this, the savior complex. It's the unconscious need to rescue others because fixing their problems feels easier than facing your own, because their dependence confirms your worth, because being the helper means never having to be the one who needs help. And toxic people can sense this need in you the way predators sense fear. They didn't randomly choose you. They chose you because you were already primed to find meaning in their dysfunction. And what about your own life? The one you've been neglecting while managing theirs. Their drama is remarkably convenient, isn't it? While you're absorbed in their relationship crisis, you don't have to think about your own loneliness. While you're helping them navigate their career problems, you don't have to face your own professional stagnation. While you're playing therapist to their emotional chaos, you don't have to sit with your own unprocessed pain, your own unmet needs, your own terrifying questions about who you are and what you want. Their problems are a full-time distraction from the emptiness you'd otherwise have to confront. And perhaps, just perhaps, that's been useful to you in ways you haven't wanted to admit. There's also the possibility that this dynamic feels familiar because it is familiar. Maybe this isn't your first toxic friendship. Maybe this pattern echoes something from your childhood, a parent who was emotionally unavailable unless you were useful to them, a sibling whose needs always came first, a family system where love was conditional on your willingness to sacrifice yourself. Your nervous system recognizes this imbalance not as wrong, but as home. It's the emotional weather you grew up in, and even though it hurts, it's known. And the human psyche has a strange tendency to recreate familiar pain rather than risk unfamiliar peace. You might be clinging to this friendship, not despite how it makes you feel, but because of it. Because this kind of hurt is the kind you understand, the kind you know how to navigate, the kind that confirms the beliefs you formed about yourself long before this friend ever appeared. Then there's the fear beneath it all, the terror that if you let this person go, no one will fill that space. That bad company is still better than no company. That being used is still better than being alone. This is scarcity thinking, the belief that friendship is a limited resource and you should be grateful for whatever scraps you can get. We've reached the end, and if you're still here, you're ready for the truth that changes everything. Leaving a toxic friendship isn't about them, it's about who you become in the space they leave behind. It's about what happens when you stop defining yourself by your usefulness to someone who never valued you. When you stop organizing your life around someone else's chaos, when you finally allow yourself to exist without constantly justifying that existence. And that transformation, however necessary, is terrifying. Because on the other side of this friendship isn't just freedom, it's you, unmediated, unoccupied, facing the question you've been avoiding. Who am I when I'm not busy saving someone else? The first thing you'll encounter is the void. There will be relief, yes, a lightness you haven't felt in years, like setting down a weight you didn't realize you were carrying, but there will also be unexpected emptiness. The silence where their chaos used to be will feel louder than the noise ever was. Your calendar will have gaps. Your phone will be quieter. The evenings you spent managing their latest crisis will suddenly stretch out with nothing to fill them. And this emptiness will make you doubt your decision. You'll remember the good moments, the times they made you laugh, the rare instances when they actually showed up for you. Your mind will try to convince you that it wasn't that bad, that you overreacted, that you should reach out and apologize. This is not clarity. This is withdrawal. Your psyche is adjusting to the absence of a relationship that, however damaging, had become part of your daily architecture. Let yourself feel the emptiness without rushing to fill it. This void is not a problem to solve. It's space you're reclaiming. In that space, you'll have to meet yourself again. The hobbies you abandoned because you never had time. The boundaries you dissolved because maintaining them seemed too difficult. The version of yourself you postponed because someone else's needs always felt more urgent. This process of rediscovery is uncomfortable because you're essentially meeting a stranger, the person you were before you became someone's emotional support system, or perhaps the person you never got to become because you were too busy holding someone else together. You'll excavate parts of yourself you forgot existed, interests that got shelved, dreams that got delayed, standards that got lowered. And you'll have to decide, piece by piece, what to keep and what to release. This is identity reconstruction, and it's messy and slow and sometimes painful because you're building a self that stands alone, that doesn't need external chaos to feel purposeful. You'll grieve, and the grief will surprise you. You're not mourning who they were. You're mourning who you hoped they would become. You're mourning the friendship you imagined you had, the one where your loyalty was eventually reciprocated, where your patience finally paid off, where they woke up one day and recognized everything you'd given. You're mourning the time you invested, the energy you poured into someone who treated you like a resource rather than a person. You're mourning the version of yourself who believed that unconditional tolerance was the same thing as love. Let yourself grieve all of it. This isn't weakness. This is how you metabolize loss and transform it into wisdom. And your understanding of friendship will recalibrate. Your tolerance for imbalance will shrink. You'll notice red flags earlier. The friend who only calls when they need something. The person who never asks how you're doing. The relationship where you're always accommodating and they're always demanding. Some people will call you cold now, will say you've changed, will accuse you of being less understanding than you used to be. They're wrong. You're not cold. You're just no longer available for exploitation. You haven't lost your capacity for compassion. You've simply redirected it toward people who actually reciprocate it. True friendship is mutual elevation, not one-sided salvation. Healthy relationships don't require you to shrink, to perform, to constantly prove your worth. The friends worth having don't punish you for having boundaries. Look at your life right now. How much of your energy is consumed by people who wouldn't cross the street for you? How many friendships do you maintain out of guilt rather than genuine connection? How many people in your life take far more than they give? And you've simply accepted this as the price of not being alone? Enough. Your life is too short, your energy too finite, your heart too valuable to be a resource for people who see you as a tool rather than a person. You deserve friendships that honor you, that celebrate you, that give as much as they receive.